So in this video, I cover a question from a viewer comparing two different credit card mindsets. Specifically, he was wondering if it would be better to focus on a single points ecosystem first for a redemption before moving on to the next one, or would having a core credit card setup supplemented with welcome offers be the better strategy. We also compared his options for dining and grocery spending and whether he should use his Amex Gold card or Hilton Surpass card for those purchases in his specific situation. And so with those two questions, there's a lot to cover in this video. So with all that being said, let's just jump right in. So this is an interesting topic because there's a lot of great questions in this one that are a little bit longer, but definitely a great way to look at certain topics in the credit card space. So the first one comes from Matt F. And he says, "Hey Stan, what are your thoughts on using a single ecosystem as your core credit card setup based on a specific redemption goal, then switching to a different ecosystem for your core setup for a different redemption goal? For example, using the Amex Trifecta as your core credit card setup when planning for a big international trip, then switching to the Chase Trifecta as your core credit card setup when planning for a few years of domestic travel, assuming the travel portal would likely be used here. Is it worth it to switch back and forth, or should your core credit card setup stay consistent and we should all just use welcome offers to get the points we need?" He also mentions that he is one of my credit card consultation clients, so thank you so much for that. He said he used the consult service that I had provided earlier this year, and he just hit the points target he needed to book the first trip that we discussed together. The plan worked perfectly, and he was able to pull all the catering from his wedding last week on the Amex Gold, which is awesome. By the way, congrats on your wedding. I know we had talked about it earlier a couple months ago that you were planning for that wedding, and so that's really awesome to hear that you had a great time, and hopefully you're enjoying newlywed life. And it's awesome that the catering is on the Gold card because those 4x points goes a long way with an expense as big as that. Anyone on the events should book the call. So thank you for that referral, Matt. Appreciate it. Anyone wants to take their credit card strategy to the next level, I'm always here for consultations, and you can check it out on my website if that's something that interests you. But essentially his question is, there's two ways to look at things, right? There's the core setup switch, which is what I'm going to call as setup A, and there's the core setup plus welcome offers, which is the core, of course, B. So like you said before, if in A, the nice thing about A is that if you're kind of being more targeted, you're earning more points through a category spend. So you're getting the cards, getting the welcome offers, and then earning points through the spend because you're focusing on that one setup. This reminds me of the series that John R. has been doing with, he does like 1 month with Amex, 1 month with Chase, 1 month with Citi. I think it's cool to see that happen and cool to see how that has turned out, but that's the system that they're describing. One of the things I would say is that it's dependent on issuer approval. So if you're building a setup based on a trifecta from one issuer, the issue is that you have to apply for each of those cards within that same issuer. And so there's all these rules that come up. For example, the Amex 1.5, the Amex 2.90, you have the Chase 524. You can't apply for multiple Citi cards all at once. There's like Wells Fargo, there's like a 6-month limit, just like Capital One, there's a 6-month limit. There's a lot of limits to applying for cards within a single ecosystem, which is why we'll typically jump from one ecosystem to the other so that we can make sure that we can get the cards that we need. And so that's the issue. The next issue with doing a core setup switch strategy is that once a setup is complete, what do you do with it? That's another issue because, for example, in your original question, Matt, you said you start with Amex first, get all those points, then switch to Chase. So if you had the Amex Platinum, Amex Gold, and Amex Blue Business Plus, which are the Amex Trifecta, and now you've gone to the Chase Sapphire Preferred, Chase Freedom Flex, Chase Freedom Limited, what are you going to do with the other cards you already have? Because now you have the Platinum and the Gold. They cost, almost $1,000 a year with all their statement credits, by the way. And so what are you going to do with them? Are you going to cancel them? Are you going to keep them? What are you going to do? So it doesn't really, for me, make a lot of sense to do it that way. Now, if you went the opposite way, went to Chase Trifecta first, then got the Amex Trifecta, I think it would make a little more sense. So that's another example in the opposite direction, the opposite extreme. But I personally, I think that's just it's a hard way to do things. As we all know, welcome offers are the best way to get points anyways. And so that's what I would probably focus on more, is those welcome offers, which is what the second setup or second methodology is like, which is the core setup plus the welcome offers. So in this setup, you have a stable core setup that you made, and then you just basically pick welcome offers off the table as you see them come in. That, I think, is something that I'm more of a fan of, just because I like the stability of having a core setup. It's because it's more structured and more organized. You always have a setup to fall back on, and it's always going to be there, and it's consistent. And so that's why I've moved to this strategy myself, where I really only have the US Bank Altitude Reserve as the only annual fee card in that core setup, but every other card in that setup is a no annual fee type of card, because that way I can keep that setup and still use it accordingly when I'm not working on a welcome offer. That's really the most important thing, is that when you want to get points, the welcome offer is going to be the way to do that quickly. And so the next thing is for this setup is that the welcome offer cards are also very expendable, right? And so if, for example, I wanted to get like the Barclay card, AA Aviator Red card, for the miles, that's a great card to have, but I don't necessarily need to keep it after the first year, because I have already a core setup that I'm using for spending anyways. So once that card goes away, or once a card gets that 12-month period, once that elapsed, I can go ahead and cancel that card with not any issues with my core credit card setup. And so you can keep doing that for each welcome card you have. If you want to keep it, turn it into a bench card, like turn it into a no annual fee card, that's something you can do too. But there's a lot more, I think, flexibility by doing the core setup plus the welcome offers, as opposed to the core setup switch setup. So that's what my personal preference is. So I don't want to say I'm biased, but I'm a little biased. But I'm sure there are certain situations where that core setup switch actually can be helpful too. And so because of that, I want to know from you guys, this last poll of this live stream, to let me know which one of those setups do you prefer, the methodology. Is it the core setup switch, where you get the Amex trifecta, then the Chase trifecta, then the Citi trifecta? Or would you do something where you have a core setup that's stable and then just pick welcome offer cards as they come up? So do you prefer core setup switch, which is A, or the stable core setup, which is B? Which one of this do you prefer? And it looks like, for the most part, most people prefer kind of on the same mindset as myself, where you have a stable core setup that you use for spending, and then you can just take welcome offers as you come up. There's also some people who have mentioned that the core setup switch strategy is something they prefer instead, where you focus on just one ecosystem at a time. For those people that have selected that or think that, if you have any opinions on it, leave it in the comments below, because I'm interested to hear, in what situations do you think that would be a better move? I was trying to figure that out myself, and I really couldn't figure out what would be exception, except for maybe the instance where you're starting with Chase first and then building up to American Express, and just you want to get all the cards in all the ecosystems. That may be one way to think about it. Robert J says, you biased that third question. I certainly did. I know the thing is, I don't have to be neutral. I can have one opinion or the other. But, if you've watched a lot of my content, you know that I really like the idea of a core setup, because the earnings is just a small piece of the puzzle. It's not as big as you think it is, because even if you get 3x, 4x or what have you, it's not going to be as nearly as good as the welcome offers you get from getting a new card. So you might as well just do that instead for that aspect of your credit card strategy. But for your typical day-to-day earnings, it's probably better to just have these 5% cards or whatever, no annual fee cards, to just get that easy cash back or easy points, whatever your situation is. Filmo is on the house. Filmo has been operating coreless for years. Yes, you have, Filmo. And I think it's interesting because you always have a welcome offer card to hit. But I don't know, maybe one day you'll just change your mind. That's my hope, but we'll definitely have to see. But thanks for chiming in here. I have, Kirby G says, I have the CO Duo, Capital One Duo, thanks to Stan's recommendation, but due to welcome offers and Delta Reserve upgrade offer, I haven't actually used it that much. Well, see, there it is. So that's where you see where you have a core setup, but then you don't use it because you're just doing welcome offers. So people are like, well, why do I even have a core setup at all? Because I'm just doing welcome offers. If you are like that, and you are like my bro Filmo, then you can certainly get away with no core setup. But for the rest of us, saying people here in this chat, we want to make sure that we have a core setup so that we have something to fall back on. Again, that core setup should be something of a lower annual fee. Mine is literally just the US bar, so that's $400 annual fee, but minus the $325 travel dining credit, that's really $75 effective annual fee. So it's not a big deal. I can live with that. But if you have an Amex trifecta as your core setup, that's a problem, because you're spending $1,000 annual fees when you're probably also getting welcome offers too. And so that is just not the best way to do it. Robert J says, it's best to have all the ecosystems, usually $95 or less. Amex is the exception, absolutely. Journey for Point says, I don't want 50 cards, so got to have a core setup. I agree. I also don't want 50 cards. Some people have 50 cards. That's totally cool for them. I just don't want to manage all of that. I think I have about 19, 20 cards now. And so that's kind of the area where I want to be in and what's manageable for me. RemGB says, core setup is the way to go. Always need that as a fallback. All depends on how strong your core setup is. Absolutely. And RemGB, we're going to go over your question, and your core setup is also just as strong as mine, if not stronger. We'll see. The YouTube Experiment says, in theory, I prefer setup A, but in reality, it is B that I do. That's why I selected A. Yeah, in theory, A does work if you can get all the cards you wanted, if you can downgrade them to like whatever cards you want in terms of no annual fee, if you can go in the order you want to go to, if your lifestyle matches what the credit card strategy is going up. All those things have to fall into place, and I can see it being that way, but otherwise, this is kind of where we're at. So thanks for the voting. That will end the polling for this live stream, but that's always interesting to see what you guys think about it, so I appreciate the participation. Okay, Matt F. also left a second question, which is, over here. It is a little bit longer. I'm not going to read it all out, but I will summarize it in a little bit. I just want to put this question out here because this is an example of the kinds of questions I get in my consultations. And we go through them like really line by line, and we really go and dive deep through all the different idiosyncrasies and little nuances of everything when we go through it. And this is the level of detail that's really helpful for me because I'm able to figure out exactly what's going on. But of course, I don't want to read all this out to you. So if you're watching this on the replay, definitely pause the video here and read the whole thing because it's very informative. But I will now summarize what Matt F's question is in this next slide, which is basically he plans to stay at many Hiltons for the next 3 years. So he wants to climb the Hilton credit card ladder. That's really his goal. He's saying that he spends about $1,500 per month on groceries and dining and gas. He can easily meet the $15K FNC goal on the Surpass. So because of those things in mind, should he use the Amex Gold card, which he already has, to earn 72,000 MR points, which basically is the grocery dining spend he has per year, or use the Hilton Surpass card, which is 108,000 Hilton Honors points as a daily driver, given this goal, knowing that he will also get that Hilton FNC when he spends his money, all that dining grocery money, on the Hilton Surpass card. So that's the main crux of the question. When we take a look at both of these cards, we all know them, we all love them. That's what they look like. So in the gold card, you get 4x MRs on dining and US groceries with the caps on both, but the caps don't apply because his spending is lower than that. And then you also have the Hilton Surpass card, which is the 6x on US dining and US groceries. So of course, we're not talking about international, just US, so we're kind of good there. We also want to remember that when you have MR points, Hilton is an transfer partner from the MR system, and you can do that at a 1 to 2, or if there's a bonus going on, a 1 to 2.5 transfer. So that's how you get to the numbers that he was talking about when you get that transfer bonus. And so the question then becomes, how do you, transfer the points, and what's the equivalency when you use the dining and groceries with the gold versus the Surpass? And so this is generally how it would work out. And so if you had all the dining spend and grocery spend on the gold card, you earn 72K MRs at a 1-to ratio. That's 144,000 Hilton Honors points. If you had a 2.5, that's 180,000 Hilton Honors points. At the same time, if you did it all on the Surpass card, you have 108,000 Hilton Honors points plus that Hilton FNC. So on the surface, it looks like the gold card would be the better value. And ultimately, depending on how you use the FNC, it would be the better value. But we're here because we want to make sure we maximize all of our FNC value so we know that we can make that better. And I want to provide an example of how you can make that better. So this is an example of a hotel I go to all the time for my FNCs. I would have to say, except for maybe one, every FNC I've ever used has been at this hotel for staycation. So it's in Santa Monica, Southern California, great hotel, beautiful. If you haven't gone there, I highly recommend it. But basically I put this as an example because you can see on a random weekday in June, the cost to book this hotel is $1,000 and the points to book this hotel is 105,000 points per night. It is a standard room reward. That means you can use a Hilton FNC. So just as a side note, that's about a 1 cent per point valuation when you redeem points for this room. So that's not bad for points, but it's a lot of points. But if you use an FNC for this particular room, you are actually getting 105,000 points in value from that FNC. So you don't have to spend that many points. You can just use the FNC. In that case, if you use that as your example and go back to the previous slide, you can see that your FNC is now valued at 105K Hilton Honors points. And so really, as long as you use your Hilton FNC for the right redemption, and the FNC, as you guys know, is uncapped. So there's even a higher limit to this, depending on if you can find availability at, whatever you want to go to, Bali or like the Maldives or whatever. They probably have a lot better ways to redeem this. There's an upward trajectory and there's no ceiling to the limit of your FNC. Whereas you do have ceilings when you're talking about these transferable currencies. And so I think for the purposes of the FNC question, I would say I would go and do the Surpass more than I would do the gold card. Of course, there's going to be exceptions to the rule. If you can't travel in a year, obviously you want to get the points instead, because that way those points don't expire. FNCs do expire. But I want to just point out that, probably the Surpass is the way to go in this situation, because that FNC is uncapped, which is why it's so powerful, which is why, like before, the Bonvoy Bevy has nothing on the Surpass card, because their FNCs are capped and they're pretty much useless, because what can you get for 50k FNC? Not too much. So Happy Tom says, I really like this question. Well, yeah, it's a very interesting, thought-provoking question that takes a little bit more numbers, but I'm glad we had to go through it, and that's good. Journey for Points says, on top of that, got a higher annual fee. Absolutely. Now, of course, the annual fee it's kind of not, I won't say moot point, but of course, it depends on how you use the statement credits. Like, the Surpass has that $50 per quarter Hilton credit, so you could get positive $50 in value if you stay at a Hilton once per quarter. You also have the gold card with all of its fun stuff, like its Dunkin' Donuts thing and its Resi thing and its Uber thing, and there's all I don't even know anymore. I've stopped. I have the gold cards. I've stopped keeping track at this point, but they have a lot of statement credits that could get the value back, but depends on how you specifically use the card is kind of where we're going with that. Hopefully you guys agree. If you disagree, let me know, but I think I would go personally with the Surpass card over the gold card in that situation. Kirby asks, can you use an FNC as a part of a do 4 nights on points and get 5th night free, or would you have to make it a 6th night trip? So yeah, the good question that's going to go over that in a future slide, but the answer to that is, so you have to use points only. You can't use FNC and combine. So the 5th night free thing is if you purchase 4 nights with points and then you get 5th night free, you can't add on that FNC together. That's just the way it is. So unfortunately, it had to be a 6 night trip if you wanted to do it that way. Trey Genda says Aspire is another option, provides FNC automatically, and then you can spend on gold or towards another welcome offer. And I think this is a good idea. I would say that I have to do the math on this, but I'm pretty sure that the gold would be the better way to go. But the Hilton card, Aspire card, also gets you that 30k FNC too. So I don't know if spending 30k on that card would be helpful. I would say no, because their categories are not as everyday category-esque as Surpass. So I would just say in that situation, if you want to go Aspire with the FNC automatically and then the gold card for dining groceries, that would be the better way to go. I think in his question, if you I kind of skipped over a little bit, but if you read the full question, basically he is going to get the Aspire card eventually. So he's going to have both the Surpass and the Aspire card. And I'll probably have 2 Surpass cards. And so basically the recommendation, like I said before, use the Hilton Surpass card to get the FNC, 15,000, then move on. You could get it twice if you wanted to, because he's now married, so he has a player or 2, or player 1, depending on how you look at it. A shout out to Joe Barretto. So you have 2 Surpass cards, and then you can get 2 FNCs. That's a possibility. Like I said before, there's a drawback for FNCs. You have to book it over the phone. You can't do it online, which is one thing Marriott has over Hilton. The Marriott certificates, you can book them online, which is just convenient. But Hilton, you can't get a call. You have to, it expires in 1 year, which sucks. And then you can't combine this with the 5th night free. You have to actually use points for the 5th night free. I'd also say if you're itching for any kind of Hilton points, just keep an eye out for your personal 100% point sale on your account. That way you can buy those points for half penny each. And I did that I said in a recent video that I made. I bought the max amount for this year at $2,400 for 480,000 Hilton Honors points. So definitely something to think about if you want to go down that road. It's usually pretty easy to redeem Hilton points for more than half a penny each, but that's obviously paying money for it. So kind of up to you what you want to do with that.